It is, wow, it is a sad thing that I'm going to make this video because um, America has reached a point today that's just beyond tragic. 100,000 people um, have died from Covid-19 in this country. Uh, According to all available data, uh, of the total worldwide deaths of this pandemic, um, 1 out of 4 almost have been Americans, and it's like slowly the major news stations and broadcast networks are starting to make mention of all the lives that have been irrevocably destroyed and changed because of this. But we have still haven't had a day of mourning, a national or someone to some place, something. If we had some kind of leadership, right, we'd at least be memorializing these instead of conspiracy theories and a president who doesn't know what the First Amendment means. Anyway, in my own way of trying to mourn and also come to grips with my own mortality, I went to Lake Powell, Glen Canyon National Park. There's several videos attached. I took my dog, and it was it was pretty neat. But what I got from that was even more profound, and I wanted to share in this video. And it was something, man. I think because of the COVID-19, there wasn't a lot of people there. It was already far out, right? But there wasn't a lot of people there as it was, right? And thanks to the GPS on my good old Honda, it sent me. I was supposed to go to some place called Hall's Crossing, which is where the campground was, but the GPS, when I punched in Lake Powell, sent me to a town called Bullfrog. There's a town called Bullfrog in Utah on the banks of Lake Powell. It's the largest settlement on Lake Powell. So if you punch in Lake Powell in the GPS, that's where it's going to take you. Unfortunately, the idea was to go to Bullfrog and catch the ferry over to Hall's Crossing, which is a small little, it's basically got a marina, a gas station, and that's pretty much it. But here's the thing, thanks to the COVID, to the Rona, no ferry. So when I got there, they were like, hey, if your reservation's at Hall's Creek, or Hall's Crossing, which is on the other side of the lake, you're going to have to drive around the lake. And I'm like, okay, how do you do that? It's a 4+ hour drive. You know, you can literally see the marina from across the lake when you're at Bullfrog, but to get to it without the ferry, it's a 4-hour drive on something called the Bicentennial Highway, right? The Bicentennial Highway is an amazing, beautiful drive. It really is. I drove it twice. I drove it on the 23rd. Was it the 23rd? Yeah, the 23rd, because I camped out at Stanton Creek that night, and the 24th, and I drove it, and then the next day I drove it, which was my birthday, on the 25th, because it is an extremely beautiful drive through the Glen Canyon. And Jacob's Chair is there. The video that I posted that says birthday drive through Bicentennial Highway, that one stone that you see sitting on top of the mesa, that's called Jacob's Chair. And It's a beautiful, beautiful drive. And I made this video actually to talk more about that. There's something that was really special about being there in such isolation, right? I was just outside. I'm sorry, my allergies are kicking in. There's something about this. It's ancient, man. It's ancient. It's beyond sacred, right? Before I got there, I had to drive through the Navajo Nation, and what's going on with them is just terrible. Yet another sin on this country, on our country, my country. And I had to drive through what's called Code Talker Highway. It's a highway dedicated to the Code Talkers from World War II. Yeah, the Wind Talkers. And as I'm driving this highway, right? If you've ever been to the Garden of the Gods in Colorado, there's these spires of stone carved by eons of wind, and on the Code Talker Highway, the Wind Talk in the Navajo Nation, there are these 4 spires, right, carved by the wind over millennia, right? And maybe it was my imagination, maybe it was because I was on that highway and what it represented, but those solitary spires, there are like 4 of them, right, that I'm driving past, and they stood like sentinels, man, right? They stood to bear witness, and it tears fell. I couldn't stop them. They fell. I couldn't stop them, right? And there's a video that I posted where I said I had to pull over, and it was the only reason I pulled over then, because the other times I had to pull over, I was literally crying, right? Because there was times where I was the only thing besides the road that had anything to do with civilization, right? There were sections of the Bicentennial Highway and going in and around Glen Canyon and monuments and natural bridges, National Monument, and the Moab, that it's sacred, man. I went to hike, and you can see the Colorado. It's the north rim of the beginning of the Grand Canyon, and you can see the Colorado. And the Colorado, you know, you're standing there, and when I stood there in the presence of eons, right? Everything that I've been worried about, right? The incalculable losses, man. 100,000 people have died. All of those losses, the fear that something's going to happen to our country, what's going on, why is this happening, and all of that faded away when I was standing out there on that ledge, right? And it was like everything was so insignificant, right? And maybe it was because I was the only person there because of the COVID thing and other factors, but standing on that edge of that ridge, looking over the Colorado and down into the Grand Canyon, down into eons of time, everything becomes insignificant, right? And awe-inspiring isn't the word, man. It was something else, man. It was just purifying, right? It's like all of the worries that I had became muted, right? It was like, and even in my mind, the ego thing where you think about whatever that you just can't find peace, that became muted in the presence of this place, this sacred place, right? I have been to holy places, man. You know, I've been to cathedrals and mosques and ashrams and places claim to be holy, but those cathedrals and mosques and ashrams, and they're all teeming with life, right? If you go to Rome, you can't help but be in the thing, right? If you go to Benares, if you go to Mecca, if you go to any place that you consider holy, or a lot of people consider holy, it's teeming with life, right? And standing on the edge of that thing, or going to monuments, or going to Natural Bridge National Monument, and standing in front of the evidence of tens of millions of years, right? Most rational people understand that whatever we do is not going to have like an effect on the greater world, right? Not many of us are world changers, right? We understand this, and you have to you internalize it to a point, right? But standing in front of that with no one else there was no other vehicle around, there were no other people around. I couldn't make out a man-made structure for several stretches of that drive, right? It's like I said, other than the vehicle I was in and the car and the road I was riding on, it was like, the power of the place, right? So on the 24th, the 25th, around midnight, I made a little fire, and I burned some sage, and I said what little prayers I remembered from my childhood, and I asked to speak to the ancestors, and I'm standing there, and the night of the 24th and the 25th was the Milky Way put on a show, man. I have never seen that many stars in my life. It was from horizon to horizon. Just the entire night sky was filled with stars. And the only way I could tell where the horizon was where the stars broke in the as the mountains stopped them. I walked away from the camp. I was about, I'd say, 40 yards to where, the little solar light that I was hanging on my campsite was just, it wasn't affecting where I was, but I could see the light, and it was total darkness. And the lights, the stars, I've never seen that many stars in my life. And I looked up at the stars, and it had an effect on me, right? Tears fell out of my face, because all I could think about was, as I'm looking up at into all these stars, into these galaxies, man. I think back in 2004, the Hubble telescope was pointed at a parcel of space near Polaris, near the North Star, where it's always been dark, right? Throughout history, we've always thought that that's a dark space next to the Polaris, the North Star. So they pointed the Hubble telescope at it for 9 months. And the pictures that started coming back, you can look this up. It's an amazing story. The first couple of pictures come back, you see these little dots, and everybody's thinking, oh, those might be the stars that are near Polaris. And the picture started getting a little clearer, and those little dots started getting into more dots, right? And we're like, oh wow, there's probably a couple of stars nearby. There's probably a galaxy nearby Polaris. And then the pictures become even more clear, and it becomes abundantly clear that the majority of those little lights that was in the dark behind Polaris are galaxies with tens of millions of stars in them apiece, right? And that story always humbles me. When you look at the stars and there's this dark space, right? You think it's just nothingness, right? But you get a better look at it, and it's filled with, I wish I could do the Carl Sagan impersonation, billions and billions and billions and billions of stars, right? That sense of insignificance didn't exist when I looked up and I saw the entire sky filled with stars. It was the most amazing thing I have ever experienced, right? There was not a spot where I could take my thumb and like, okay, there's darkness here. Yeah, I don't know how to convey this to people. I was telling my neighbors about it, and it's like, they're laughing. I don't know if they're laughing at me or with me, because the stars were so many, right? And I'm calling them stars because I don't lack the vocabulary or the intelligence to call them galaxies or whatever they're supposed to be. It just sounds bizarre to say the sky was filled with galaxies, which they probably were, but it was just amazing, right? And I had my little campfire going. And I burned some sage, and I asked to speak to the ancestors. And as I'm looking up the stars, the thought comes into my mind that these are the same stars that my ancestors looked at, that your ancestors looked at, that every human being on the face of this earth that has ever walked this earth has looked at. Same stars, man. The same fears, the same joys. Every emotion that I can possibly have, another human being looked at these same stars and had them. Every worry I've ever had, every hope I've ever had, every promise I've kept, every lie that I've told, happened under these same stars to everybody who's ever lived on this earth, right? And I felt this connection. And again, tears just fell out of my face, man. First, it was just like one or two, right? Like when you watch one of them movies with the emotional, sappy shit in it, and it makes you cry, like that. And then next thing you know, I'm ugly crying. I'm ugly crying. And then it was like experiencing a flood. It was like experiencing a flood in Texas. This energy came and just wrapped itself around me, and the tears stopped. And if you've ever cried out of fear or sadness or the loss of something, when you finish crying, you kind of feel an emptiness, right? A weight. This was different. This was like letting, like hiking 20 miles and carrying everything you own and letting it go, right? There was an energy that flowed from everywhere, right? It was like it came from the earth, it came from the sacred earth, and it came from the sacred night. It came from everywhere, right? And it was just this just powerful, I don't know how to explain it, man, right? There's just power. It was calming and energizing and peaceful, and it removed all of the sense of dread and foreboding and worry, and all there was this sense of peace, right? There was just this unbelievable connectedness, right? There's a video, several videos about Virgil in Lake Powell, and I was standing with Virgil in Lake Powell the next day after that incident, and I'm standing there, and I can hear Virgil, he's fucking off in the water, man. He's playing off in the water, and I'm standing in the water, and I don't know how this happened. I wasn't trying to make it happen. I wasn't doing some kind of weird meditation or trance or any of that. But I felt a connectedness, right? I'm going to say it was brief, but it felt like a lifetime in a few seconds. I know that's the stupidest thing I've ever said, and I've said some dumb shit. But it was like I couldn't tell where I was and where the lake was and where the canyon was It was like it was all one thing. It was all one thing, man. There was a sense of an ancient serenity, an ancient peace. It was beyond sacred. It was beyond anything I've ever experienced in my life, right? I was the only one standing, me and Virgil, I was the only human being that I could see on Lake Powell. And there was not even chemtrails of planes in the sky. No sounds of jets, no engines, nothing. But the small sounds of the small waves lapping against the shore, and the gentle breeze, and a few ambient sounds, and it just became one. It just became a single thing, right? And it wasn't a fear of losing who I was or what was going on. There was just an acceptance and a knowledge that this, right, it's just a sense of being, man. Pure consciousness, pure being. And it felt like a lifetime, but it was just a few seconds. And it was the most amazing and sacred thing I have ever experienced in my life, right? All religion is bullshit. All religion is bullshit because they tell you that it's you and God, right? There's something sacred that we're all connected to. There's something sacred that when it's just you and an ancient place. I'm not talking about you in your house, or you in a park, or you in a church or a mosque or a temple. This was an ancient place, man. Right? It was something. It was something. Right? I left 2 days ago. I left yesterday morning at 8:30, and it's almost 11:30 at night, and I still feel it. I still feel the power of it, right? It's just, I don't know, man. The sense of that everything that I worry about, the sense that all the bullshit fears that we have, right, as people, it's inconsequential. It's like throwing a grain of sand against a hurricane. But it's not the destructive force. There's an amazing, wonderful, life-giving force that's sacred to this earth, right? And we deny ourselves when we don't try to come in contact with it, right? You know, I went out there because I was feeling my mortality, my sense of, you know, my father only lived one more year older than I am right now. And I went out there in a sense of that, right? And I guess because I had that, I wanted to contact my ancestors, man. I wanted to touch the other shore, right? And I had an opportunity to be blessed to experience that, right? There were points where I had to stop driving because the power of the place was so intense, right? So intense. It's like we shouldn't fear. It's terrible what we're going through, but we shouldn't fear, right? There is a peace and a rhythm and power to life that's beyond anything that we call sacred, right? in the presence of it, man, your entire ego evaporates. And all there is just being. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced, man. It's just being. And there's a sense of peace to it. It's just I don't know how to, I do not have the intelligence or the vocabulary to convey the power of those places, man. Right? You know, I don't think I'll ever go back, because if I go back, there's going to be people there. And I was blessed to go when there was nobody there. There was no other signs of people. I saw a few cars. In my video, you see them only, like, I think you only see like 6 cars in all the videos I posted, right? Miles and miles of road. And there's a peaceful, powerful life force to this world that is older than anything we can ever imagine. It is an ancient, powerful life force, and it is life-affirming. It's not death-centric. It's life-affirming. It's powerful, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. It's just, it's something else, man. I hope everyone is okay. I hope that you don't lose faith in yourself and your friends and this place and this country. I hope we come through this. I hope not too many people suffer, but they will. Lots. But like I said, there's an energy here. There's an energy to this place, to this planet. It's ancient. It's life-affirming. There's nothing to fear. Tell the people you love them as often as you can, as many times as you can.